promise I'm wearing shorts. Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Morgan. This is my channel Pisces Paperbacks, and today I'm doing my August wrap up. I only read 5 books in August, so this should be pretty quick, but I'm really excited to talk to you about them because I really liked most of them. So let's just get started. I also washed my hair last night, and as you can see, my bangs dried so short. So we're just going to ignore that. The first book I read last month was Horror Movie by Tremblay. This is about a man who in the early 1990s was making a horror movie, an independent low-budget horror movie with his friends when a series of pretty bad things happened during the filming events. And then also in the 2020s when he is working in Hollywood to get a remake of this film made. This film that's kind of dominated his entire life. That's when his life started and kind of when it ended. And so he's really dedicated to making this reality in honor of the original movie. The book is kind of told in these alternate timeline chapters, as well as chapters that are sections from the script of the movie itself, so you get a glimpse into what they were actually filming. I found this very deeply unsettling. I was reading it on my Kindle, so I was reading it in bed at night a lot to try and get it done, especially because I think I read this book in 2 days because I had to return it to the library because I was really running out of time. So I really read it at night, and I cannot tell you the sense of dread that really took over me. There were several times where I had to put my Kindle down and be like, oh my god. Oh my god. I really liked this. I feel like it's kind of funny to read so soon after the Pallbearers Club because they are dealing with a lot of very similar themes. An unreliable narrator, kind of. Can you trust your memory? Did you deify this thing in your past, or was it actually of that much significance? Did it make you into this, or were you always this way? Kind of themes. And then also it has a really similar main character. I started reading this book and I was like, oh, it's about kind of a really tall, awkward guy who graduated college in 1992. And the Pallbearers Club is about a really tall, awkward guy who graduated high school in 1988. And I'm like, that sounds a little similar. I wonder if Paul Tremblay is really tall. And then I look it up and he actually has a Reddit AMA where he's like, I'm an extremely tall horror author, ask me anything. And I'm like, I see, writing from his lived experience. So that was kind of funny. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I thought it was, I didn't love it, but I thought it was extremely successful. Do you know what I mean? And I definitely liked it more than the Pallbearers Club. Next, I listened to the audiobook of Loud, Accept Nothing Less Than the Life You Deserve by Afualo. This is a memoir from a girl that I follow on TikTok. She's kind of an influencer. Her whole kind of shtick is calling out misogyny and calling out really misogynistic men online. That's kind of what brought her to notoriety on the internet. She's only a couple years older than me. I'm 27, I think she's 29. So I was like, the whole thing is, how do you write a memoir when you're literally not even 30? But she's had a lot of interesting things happen in her life, and while this is a memoir, I'd say a lot of it gets, it's little things throughout her life that get expanded on into this more kind of big sister, self-love relationship talk. She talks a lot about understanding what you deserve in relationships, what you deserve in your interactions with men, and in a way that doesn't feel condescending. At least I didn't think it was condescending. I do think that maybe I'm a little bit above the age that would really appreciate, really gain, meaningfully gain from the conversation. I know I mention it sometimes, but I did minor in gender, sexuality, and women's studies, so some of the conversations in this felt a little rehashing Feminism 101. But I do think that it was a valuable book, and I just like her. She reads the audiobook. She's a really interesting person. I like her perspective. I think she's funny. I will say, when you're listening to the audiobook, it becomes apparent, just how many times she talks about her being a Virgo. Sometimes it happens multiple times in the same chapter, and I was seriously all right, we get it. But overall, I liked this. I also gave it a 4. Then I read 2 graphic novels. The first was Lunar Boy by Jes and Cin Wibowo. This is a really beautiful and heartfelt middle grade about a boy, I don't remember his name, who as a child was found on a moon. So it's sci-fi, it's set in the future, and a woman who is kind of on this exploration science spaceship finds him on a moon and adopts him. And so he grows up on this spaceship, and you know, finds his family with these people. This is not the main story. The main story is that his mother moves them to a planet called New Earth because she's fallen in love and married a man. And so it's about them moving and the main character learning how to adjust to this blended family and a new school and trying to make friends. And specifically the struggle to adjust and how it's really hard when you feel like the adults in your life aren't listening to your issues or your reservations, and also how, you know, it feels to be different. Like, he wasn't raised on this planet, and he's also queer. He is a trans boy, and so he's dealing with all of these differences and struggling. And so he asks the moon to please take him back, and the moon agrees, but he has until the new year to bide his time. And so the conflict of the book is, you know, he starts making these friendships and these connections and trying to decide, does he actually want to leave still? And so this book is so beautifully drawn. The pastel colors on every page are just stunning. And it specifically also is about being queer and how amazing and wonderful it is to be queer. And there's a lot of talk in this book about cultural traditions. I believe that this is heavily inspired by Indonesian culture, and it was just, first of all, that was all very fascinating, extremely well done and beautiful, but also they talked a lot about what a rich cultural inheritance it is to be queer and to have that community around you and to learn about queer history and how important and amazing that is, because, you know, you may feel ostracized from some traditions, but if you learn about your queer elders, there are traditions and history and culture in that you didn't have access to before and you are now gaining, and how you can honor that in your life. And it truly made me tear up, giggling, screaming, kicking my feet. I think I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads, but I think it's more of a 4.5, even though I really loved it. But overall, I can't recommend this enough. If you're interested, it is middle grade, so it is a bit younger feeling, but I think the main character is like 12 or 13. But I really loved this. I thought it was really extremely well done. And another extremely well done graphic novel that I want to talk about is The Talk by Darrin Bell. This is a nonfiction graphic memoir about the author, who is a political cartoonist. It begins when he is about 6 or 7 and his mom, who is white, gives him the talk. Basically, you can't have this toy gun look realistic because police will think it's a real gun. And the world is not going to treat you the same as they treat little white boys. And so it's flashes throughout this author's life from 1984 to about 2014, and basically just like encounters with racism and how each of them kind of was another layer of his understanding of the world and how it continuously shaped his perception and interactions with others. And especially this book was prompted by approaching the age where he had to give the talk to his young son. And so that is kind of the narrative structure of this book. I did really like it. I thought it was really effective. I didn't love the art style, and when it's a graphic novel, that's kind of really important. I feel like it looked a bit unfinished on a lot of pages. It like more sketchy, and I know that is, you know, that is a style. It's not my preference. It was also a bit frustrating because at certain points when after he becomes an adult and a professional cartoonist, there are parts where it inserts actual cartoons that he had published in newspapers throughout like the last 20 years. And I liked the style of those. You know, those looked finished to me. So it was a little frustrating to be like, well, I know you could do it, so the whole entire book just looks a little in comparison. However, for a lot of the more hard-hitting moments, which is kind of the whole thing, but for the specifically hard-hitting moments, I do think that the artistic flow, like visually, of the scenes was very successful. Like, it really hit the mark. It delivered it perfectly. So I feel a little both ways about the art style. In terms of the narrative, I thought it was really well done, and it really hits hard when you realize who the person in the picture on the center of the cover is, and that really got me. So I don't know, I feel interesting about this. I read it all in one day out in the park while I was waiting for my laundry to wash in the laundromat. So I didn't really have time to marinate with this book. I don't really know what I want to rate it because I feel like objectively it is extremely well done. It's probably a 4.5, but like in terms of enjoyment, it was probably more of a 3.5. I'm probably gonna end up giving it like a 3.75, but I just feel like that rating shouldn't be taken into account when you are deciding if you want to read it, because I do actually think it was very good. And lastly, just last night, today is the 30th, last night was the 29th, so the night of the 29th, I finished listening to the audiobook of Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. Ruthless Vows is the sequel to Divine Rivals. Divine Rivals kind of gets looped in with the rest of like romantasy categorization, but I would say that it kind of walks the line between like a lighter romantasy versus just a fantasy that has an extremely strong romantic element. And I know that there is a difference. I know. So I'm calling it a fantasy. And so Divine Rivals is about two journalists, Iris and Roman, who write for the same newspaper. They're vying for the same columnist position, and they're both reporting on the same war between two gods that is happening in their land. This kind of takes place in an almost 1930s World War II inspired fantasy world. So they have cars, they have phones, you know, they have electricity, but also it's fantasy, it's kind of old-timey. Like, women still have to mostly wear dresses. You know, that's the vibe. So they're working at the same newspaper when Iris quits and start working at this different newspaper, and through a series of events, they both become wartime reporters on the front lines. War correspondents, that's what I'm trying to say. And it is also, at the same time, the story of Roman and Iris secretly exchanging letters through magical typewriters. That is kind of the secondary, or that's kind of the main conflict of the book, is that they're exchanging these letters and their relationship with each other. Ruthless Vows is a continuation of that book, and I have to say, this is not a spoiler because it's not about the actual plot. My biggest issue with book one is that I feel like it was extremely lacking in terms of world building. I finished that book and I was like, okay, there's a war going on. I don't know anything about these gods. Who are these gods? Elsa, stop it. What are their powers? Like, what does this world function like with these gods? What are these gods? What's the goal? How does he have an army? Like, I had so many questions, and I was like, this war is like not other than the romance, it's the cornerstone of this story, is that the war is happening. You know what I mean? When you describe the plot, you're like, there is a fantasy war between these two gods, and you don't know anything about these gods by the end of book one. Well, book two is basically just world building, and it solves my biggest problem with book one. So you learn about the gods, you learn about their magic, you learn a little bit more about their powers, and I really like how the magic built out in this story. In terms of my review of this book, I think I gave book one like 3.5 stars, 4 stars. I thought it was pretty generic at the beginning, and then by the end I was like, it won me over. It won me over by the end. What can I say? I'm a sucker for a good ending. Book two, right from the jump, it's better, in my opinion. And then also, the whole time, all I could think about was like, the word that kept coming to mind, lovely. It was just so lovely to read it. The writing was nice. The story was really good. The relationship is interesting and developing. Like, it was just such a lovely, the characters are lovely. The book is lovely, and I loved it. I really, really loved it. I thought I did such a good job. I fucking sobbed like a baby at the end, like really hard. And I just thought that it was great. I don't know. I just really loved it. I'm so happy that I read it, that my friend Julia pushed me to read it sooner, and I'm just glad that I finished the series. Honestly, I know there's only 2 books in it, but I did finish it. 2 things, or I guess 3 things. 1, I'm giving this book 5 stars. 2, I don't know that this stands up in comparison to other 5-star favorites of mine. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is a 5-star, but also I think it's less of a 5-star than other books. I don't know if that makes sense. Another thing, I think that of the entire book, the part that I kept zoning out the most is unfortunately like the climactic action at the end, like the climax of the book. I was kind of in and out, like paying attention, which is like not good, but I also wasn't doing anything else. Like, and for some reason I found that section to be like a little like, whereas the rest of the book I was like, yeah. But then there's quite a bit after, like, the climactic action, so I was like, alright, I'm back in. And that's the part that I really cried at. So I don't know, I just really liked it. I have a copy of Divine Rivals that I got at Julia's Christmas and July party. It was the gift that I picked to take home. And I am so excited to go buy a copy of Ruthless Vows to keep on the shelf right next to it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you're going to read any of these, if you have read any of them, what you thought of them. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!